Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, you are having a wonderful day today. So, I thought that I would talk about this John Fury interview. Now, for those of you that don't know who John Fury is, John Fury, I believe, is the father of the recent WBC heavyweight world champion, Tyson Fury, and undefeated heavyweight world champion, Tyson Fury. He is the father of Tyson, and overall, he said something very interesting in an interview that he had yesterday. He basically said that he actually did not want Tyson Fury to face Deontay Wilder for a third time, and then overall he said that he should let Deontay, fight for the WBC strap, for a vacant WBC strap, that he should give it up and then fight Anthony Joshua. And the reason why I said this is because he believes that he's more motivated for an Anthony Joshua than he is for a Deontay Wilder fight. He also said overall that he thinks he's living, in Miami with a lot of yes men around him, and overall that, I'm not sure if he actually said that he was partying or not when it came down to it, but when it comes down to it, he certainly believes that at least he looks like, he hopes that his son Tyson Fury is putting his best foot forward. So I thought that I would talk about this because I've seen a certain amount of other people talk about it. I found it a little bit interesting, and let's just get to the topic. So, anyways, first of all, this did surprise a lot of people because John Fury, he had a very honest perspective about his son. But really, when you take a look at the past, I think John Fury, excuse me, I think he's actually always had an honest perspective about his son. I don't think John Fury has ever really been afraid to mince words or not say something. I don't think he's ever been afraid of to say anything about his son publicly. I remember when it was after the fight with Otto Wallin when it came down to it, and for those of us that remember, it was a very tough fight when it came down to it. It was a very tough fight that Tyson Fury had against Otto Wallin, and I think Tyson Fury, I think he underestimated Otto Wallin when it came down to it, and he ended up getting a big cut over his eye, and there's a lot of people overall that would argue that that fight should have been stopped. But of course, that didn't happen when it came down to it. In Tyson Fury, he just got out of there and he won by unanimous decision. I believe it was by unanimous decision, but I could be wrong about that. Anyways, when it comes down to the overall, I remember after that fight had happened, John Fury said that if his son Tyson, if he remains with Ben Davidson, that he was not going to have that long of a career, or that overall that would be the end of his career. I remember him saying that. Now, Ben Davidson, in my opinion, he's actually not a bad trainer. I think overall that he does decently well when it comes down to it. And he trains Billy Joe Saunders, and overall, who else does he train? I believe he trains Josh Taylor when it comes down to it. So I don't think overall that he's a bad coach. But I do think that Tyson Fury going to the Krung gym, I do think overall that improved him, and I do think overall that made him a better fighter. So sometimes you do need a corner change. Now, of course, Deontay Wilder, he also recently had a corner change. I believe actually that he has JD's still in his corner, but Malik Scott is now in his corner instead of Mark Breland. Now, is that going to be a good move? Is that going to be a bad move? We'll have to see when it comes down to it. Personally, for the people that are saying, well, do you think that we're going to see a new and improved Deontay Wilder in this third fight? I don't know. Personally, if you were going to ask me, probably not. I think we're going to see a very similar version of Deontay Wilder. To be honest with you, it wouldn't surprise me if we see the exact same version of Deontay Wilder. And I know a lot of people, they're not going to agree with that. But, that's just kind of what, not only my intuition is telling me, but when I take a look at it, when I even take a look at things logically and objectively, Deontay is just, I'm not really sure if he has that high of boxing IQ. And that's not me saying overall that he cannot pick up on some things, but I think that I think that if he's able to hit him early on, which he was really able to in both fights, that it's going to be very hard for Deontay Wilder to stick to a different type of game plan, because he's going to be very uncomfortable if Tyson Fury is able to get to him a little bit early on. And overall, basically, when people get uncomfortable, when they get put under stress, they always kind of go back to what they know. And I know I'm not the only one overall that knows that saying when it comes down to it. So do I believe we're going to see a much more improved Deontay Wilder? Personally, I don't think so. But if Tyson Fury, if he does not take this fight seriously when it comes down to it, which is somewhat of what John Fury was alluding to, that if he has a bunch of yes men around him and that if he is not taking Deontay Wilder seriously in this third fight when it comes down to it, Deontay may not need to change anything, because if Tyson Fury takes him lightly, Deontay Wilder may be able to knock him out in this fight. Because I don't see Deontay Wilder being able to win on points, but when it comes down to the overall, if Tyson Fury is not careful, Deontay Wilder certainly can get him in a third fight. So he needs to be careful. Now, of course, a certain amount of people overall are going to ask me, well, do you believe overall, they're just making excuses because, of the cheating allegations in the second fight? I've already told people this. I've never been a believer of the cheating allegations. I've never been a believer one time of the cheating allegations that the Deontay Wilder fans have really tried to put on Tyson Fury. I've never been a believer of those. And I know a lot of the Deontay Wilder fans are not going to like that. That's okay. This channel really is not for them. it is what it is. This is not a major fanboy channel when it comes down to it. It is what it is. I'm here to give a logical and objective perspective on things. And the Deontay Wilder fan base, they're about as far from logical and objective as you can get. So it is what it is. So these LDBC channels, when it comes down to these LDBC and new media channels, when it comes down to it, you cannot necessarily rely upon them for a logical and objective analysis, because they have so much invested in this fight emotionally when it comes down to it, that it really is affecting them. That's why you cannot rely upon them for an objective and logical analysis. Channels like Dante's Boxing Nation, Blue Blood Sports TV, 78 Sports TV, Champside, Boxing Eagle, Aki TV, all these channels, they're very much emotionally invested in this fight. So that means what? If you're emotionally invested in something, you're never going to be logical and objective about that thing. So it is what it is. That's why you cannot rely upon these channels for an objective and logical analyzation. So it is what it is. But, it's whatever. My channel is not about being in your emotions. My channel overall is not about, being a big fanboy or anything like that. My channel, once again, is about objective and logical analyzation. And when I take a look at this fight, could John Fury be right? Could he be right about Tyson Fury not taking things seriously? Who knows? In the first fight, but in the fight that he had against Vladimir Klitschko many years ago, we know overall that he went into a deep depression, and overall that he kind of went out of sorts. Now, of course, I'm going to get a certain amount of the Deontay Wilder fans that say, oh, that was just a cover-up for PEDs and all sort of stuff. That was just a big lie. Well, what I'll say is this. Do I believe that Tyson Fury was on PEDs? Yes, personally, I do. But I don't think overall that his depression or overall his hard time story, I don't think that was a fake, personally. Because I remember certain pictures of Tyson Fury where he had gained up to 400 pounds. And overall, Tyson Fury really was not in the public eye for a very long time. Now, maybe one could say overall that's because he was, hiding from the PED allegations, all that sort of stuff. But I don't think that you're going to gain, weight to the point to where you're all the way up to 400 pounds. I don't think overall that you're going to gain all that weight. I don't think that you're going to look so physically and mentally unhealthy and be on cocaine and all that sort of stuff. I don't think you're going to do that if you're 100% mentally there. And Tyson Fury was not all the way mentally there after he beat Vladimir Klitschko. Now, could Tyson Fury, could he be suffering from the same thing? There's certain times overall where people, once they reach the mountaintop, they get very depressed, which is interesting because a lot of people would think overall that it would be the exact opposite. But I understand the mindset because a lot of people, a lot of athletes, once they reach the mountaintop, once they reach the peak in their careers, even if that means being, the greatest at something in the world, a lot of the times they can actually become depressed because, they basically that means overall that there's nothing more to achieve to them, or overall, that they've made it to the top of the world. And where do they go from now? Where do they go from there? When it comes down to it. So I understand the mindset when it comes down to it. But, I think those certain people, when it comes down, I think they have to learn overall that it can just be very repetitive when it comes down to it. And sometimes you have to embrace the repetitiveness, of being on that same level of greatness. Sometimes, you look to it, there may not be a way overall, in your opinion, to become greater. But at the same time, you always can try to become greater overall by improving yourself every day and trying to become a better version of yourself every day. So it is what it is. But that being said, I understand the mindset, because certain athletes, they just have the mindset of that when it comes down to it. So hopefully Tyson Fury can get himself mentally right for this fight. Now, I'm not necessarily sure how accurate John Fury is with this anyway, but he has been pretty accurate with his son before. So who knows? He may he may be just accurate with this. But one thing I'll say is this: hopefully for Tyson Fury, he puts his best foot forward. Because if he ends up not putting his best foot forward, it certainly could cost him in this fight, and that would be a very big mistake that he would always look back upon. So we'll see what ends up happening in this fight. And let me tell you this: if Tyson Fury, if he ends up losing to Deontay Wilder, when it comes down to it, if he ends up losing to Deontay Wilder, there is going to be no excuses for him when it comes down to it. A lot of people in the Andrew Ruiz versus Anthony Joshua rematch, a lot of people also thought that Andrew Ruiz was not putting his best foot forward. And overall, do I believe that? I certainly do believe that, because Andrew Ruiz, you could tell that he gained even more weight in the second fight than what he did in the first fight. And Andrew Ruiz, obviously he's always been a little bit flabby. But when it comes down to it, he even gained like an extra 20, 30 pounds of fat that went straight to his stomach in that rematch when it came down to it. Now Anthony Joshua still, in my opinion, deserves a lot of credit for that, because he conquered his demons when it came down to it. He won the rematch dominantly. But when it comes down to it overall, Andrew Ruiz definitely should have taken that fight more seriously. And hopefully for Tyson Fury, hopefully he is taking this third fight against Deontay Wilder seriously, because Deontay Wilder, he's going to come in here and he's going to be very motivated to take back what he lost. And that can be a very dangerous fighter. So we'll see what Tyson Fury ends up doing. Now, if you were going to ask me, do I believe once again that we're going to see a Deontay Wilder that's completely changed and that is working on some things? I believe that he's going to try to work on some things. I just don't know how successful he's going to be. But if Tyson Fury does not take this fight seriously, Deontay Wilder may not need to work on certain things. He may clip him. So we'll see what happens. But when it comes down to the overall, like I said, we'll see what happens. I remember there was a fight earlier this year. It was between Francis Ngannou and Stipe Miocic, and that was a UFC fight. For those of you that don't watch UFC, Stipe Miocic, he was a great heavyweight fighter. Both Francis Ngannou and Stipe Miocic are great heavyweight fighters when it comes down to it. But Stipe Miocic is looked at as the greatest heavyweight of all time in the UFC's history, because he has the most amount of title defenses. And Stipe also is a very skilled heavyweight fighter, even though, of course, he has holes in his game. And I remember overall when the Francis Ngannou rematch was happening, and I made my prediction. I said I thought that Stipe Miocic was going to win over Francis Ngannou, because I don't really know much that has changed about Francis Ngannou. Francis in the first fight, he got thoroughly dominated. When it came down to it, Stipe was able to not only beat him in the wrestling, he was also able to beat him in the stand-up, because Francis was very sloppy with his striking. He was not very disciplined when it came down to it. His stamina was completely out the window after the first round, and when it came down to it, he could not handle his wrestling. Well, a couple of years later, now, of course, this is a little bit odd, but MMA fighters always they're always seeming to be able to change a hell of a lot more than what boxers do, for whatever strange reason, when it comes down to it. For whatever strange reason in MMA, you're always going to hear of certain comeback stories when it comes down to it, like a Michael Bisping or like a Charles Oliveira or like a Francis Ngannou. But in boxing, that just usually doesn't happen. I'm not saying that it can never happen. Of course, Sugar Ray Leonard was able to bounce back after he won against Roberto Duran. But Sugar Ray Leonard kind of didn't fight in his original style anyway. So I don't know if I would necessarily count that one. Manny Pacquiao was able to come back against Eric Morales, I suppose. And there's a couple of other examples. But in boxing, you just don't usually see it happen as often, for whatever strange reason. So it is what it is. But do I believe that we're going to see a Francis Ngannou Stipe Miocic rematch type of dynamic in this fight? No. I believe that Deontay, I don't believe that he's going to really have that much more of a skill set than what he did before. a certain amount of people may disagree with me, but that's just personally what I think. So it is what it is. But best of luck to Deontay Wilder. I'm not rooting against him when it comes down to it. I wish everyone the best of luck. So we'll see what happens in that fight. But I believe personally that right now, as of my prediction, I still will be betting on Tyson Fury. There's really nothing overall that, at least definitive, that would deviate from my prediction. But we'll see overall what Tyson Fury comes in at. If Tyson Fury, if he ends up coming in even heavier, let's say that he clearly gained weight when it comes down to it, and he comes into the weigh-in at about 280, 290. If he comes in at something like that and clearly looks flabbier, then that'll tell me that Tyson Fury, that he did not take his diet seriously. So we'll see what happens. But like I said, if Tyson Fury, if he does not take this third fight serious, there will be no excuses. Deontay Wilder, he can win this fight when it comes down to it. And if he does win this third fight, all glory will be to Deontay Wilder, or at least all credit will be towards Deontay Wilder. Okay? Because I'm not one to give excuses, even if a fighter does not take a fight seriously. That's on you. So it is what it is. We'll see what Tyson Fury does. We'll see what Deontay Wilder does. Anyways, that's really about it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll talk to you all later.